Listen to Salam Media.
The time is exactly 9:50 a.m. Welcome back. This is News and Views with me, Julie Ali. And another big story of the day is OUTA in the headlines once again, and rightly so. They are taking the country's energy regulator to court for failing to look after the interests of the South African economy by granting generating licenses to the Karpowership consortium, which they have been in the headlines for the couple of months, for the past couple of months. We do know they are a Turkish consortium, and we do know then when this story just broke, civil society was up in arms about this issue. So is it once again about tenderpreneurs? What is going on here, and what is NERSA's role in this matter? Surely they knew what the South African public's feelings were about Karpowership, or do we need to look at the broader picture and perhaps accept the fact that just perhaps this might be the answer to our energy problems? Let's talk to Brendan Slade. He is the legal project manager at OUTA. A very good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Julie. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you here. And undoubtedly, you heard my opening remarks. How do you respond to that?
Well, I would respond by saying, yes, we need to look at the broader picture. There are a lot of role players, a lot of stakeholders. And just to put it short, unfortunately, Karpowership is not the solution to our energy crisis currently. Although government may gun the ball that is in fact the case, I will, through our interview, illustrate that it is simply not so.
Okay, so explain to us why not. I mean, we've been having rolling blackouts for the past so many years. We have been, we've suffered a triple whammy in KZN alone. It was obviously the whole of the country was COVID, 2 years lockdown of COVID. Then we had the riots in KZN. Now we've had the floods in KZN. The economy is just, well, I don't even know if managing to get our heads above water. And every now and again, we have these rolling blackouts. Businesses are crying out to government saying we cannot afford to have more blackouts. The reason for the blackouts is a different story altogether. We understand that there's large scale sabotage happening at Eskom, but let's leave that story for another time. Let's look at Karpowership. Just maybe it is the answer to our problems.
Just to put that into context, the Karpowership came into being, or the reason we are talking about it is part of the risk mitigation program initiated by the DMRE. So around 2 years ago, the minister promulgated a declaration or determination which called for the procurement or the buying of an additional 2,000 megawatt of electricity generation capacity. So then the procurement process is started, and Karpowership, or the consortium of Karpowership, which consists of 3 IPPs, then won the bid for 1,200 megawatts worth. So the issue is, the whole process started as an emergency at the time, two years back, and we haven't bolted from square one since. There are still a lot of processes still outstanding. And concurrently with this current process, there are other independent power producers which are more than capable to do the job at a fraction of the cost it would cost for Karpowership. So these independent power producers include producers of renewable energy, solar, wind, and so forth. So it is not the most economically viable option for the country to pursue contracts with Karpowership. And you mentioned that we had some issues in KZN with the floods. And just to put Karpowership in perspective, those kinds of utilization of Karpowership generation is usually used in places in the world struck by natural disasters. So they would generate electricity for a short amount of period, for that period in which the authorities cannot provide power. So in South Africa's case, government wishes to enter into a short-term solution contract, which it basically ought to be, for a period of 20 years. And we've calculated that that would cost the country an estimated of 210 billion rands worth.
Okay, so where does OUTA sit with this issue by taking NERSA to court? I mean, obviously, the suggestion is that NERSA has not acted in the best interest of South Africa. You're talking about the billions of rands it's going to cost us in the 20-year period, which we can't afford. That money could be better utilized for health, infrastructure, rebuilding, housing, and a whole host more, which is so sorely needed in the country. Do you think that you've got a leg to stand on as OUTA taking this matter to court? What are the chances of winning the case?
Yes, we certainly do. Just at this stage, there's no contracts entered into by government as of yet. But in order for Karpowership to be able to implement any contract, they need to have the authority to do so. So that is where NERSA comes in. And as the electricity or the energy regulator, NERSA has to grant generation licenses to whoever wants to generate that. So Karpowership approached NERSA with 3 applications for generation licenses at Kruger, Richards Bay, and Saldanha Bay. Earlier last year, around August, OUTA participated in the public participation process, and we objected to Karpowership being granted those licenses. Subsequently, NERSA approved the licenses, and in October of last year, they published their reasons for their approval. So this did not sit well with OUTA or civil society, because the bottom line is many environmental processes, regulatory processes, and other important processes were not dealt with at the time when Karpowership approached NERSA. So NERSA could not have reasonably been in a position to confirm whether or not they should approve. So obviously we all know NERSA approved this, and subsequently OUTA brought an application in terms of PAJA, that is the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, in order to set these generation licenses aside. So it's not setting aside the deal between government and Karpowership, it's setting aside the role of NERSA and the generation licenses in this context.
So how is that going to serve us as civil society and South Africa as a whole?
Well, if we are quite confident of the case we have made out, if these decisions by NERSA is set aside, that would mean that Karpowership cannot lawfully generate electricity. They cannot lawfully generate electricity. Any subsequent power purchase agreements entered into with Eskom would not be enforceable. So with the review application, we are asking the court set aside the approvals to grant these generation licenses and put the ball back in NERSA's court to start the process again, so that NERSA as a regulator and as an administrator can take all the relevant information into account when these decisions are to be made.
So how can we trust NERSA to make the right decisions going forward? I'm thinking that, again, I mean, we, the South African public or civil society, are very skeptical when it comes to contracts, because we have a very, very bad history of tenderpreneurs. And immediately when something like this comes to light, we jump to the correct conclusion that someone's pockets are being lined. Where do we stand with this? I also understand that a losing bidder, which is DNG Energy, has claimed that the procurement process was corrupt and previously lodged a legal challenge. Are you working hand in hand with them, or is that a separate case altogether?
We are not working hand in hand with them, but we are aware of the pending litigation. But objectively speaking, it sounds too good to be true, if you get where I'm coming from. So there is it's not incorrect for civil society or the public to be suspicious of what is currently going on. Objectively speaking, if there is something untoward, if there are some procurement irregularities, which we cannot speak to necessarily, then the law should take its course. And then ultimately, the truth would come out, and that would inform the regulator and the public on what is actually going on and what should be done with these kinds of contracts. I mean, the public has lost faith in Eskom, and the public has lost faith in the regulator. So it's not wrong of us to be suspicious of any wrongdoing. But when that information comes forward, we will certainly deal with that.
Are you confident that OUTA will be successful in its bid to stop Karpowership in docking in our waters all around South Africa and go ahead and do this power supply, however it's going to be, but very expensive at that? How confident are you about this?
In terms of our court application, we are very confident, but I would like to state that we are in an unfortunate position that civil society has got to go to court to try and set these things aside. It paints the picture that it's government versus civil society, and it's a confrontational environment. That's not necessarily the case we would like to see, but we would like to call on regulators, on government stakeholders to be transparent and to work with civil society and the public so that any decisions made in the future will be made in the interest of the country. So we would like to work together with NERSA and other stakeholders and not necessarily be on the confrontational foot all the time.
Okay, I'm just wondering, government might argue that there's been some sort of a trade deal between the Turkish counterparts, Karpowership, and South African government entities. And because of that trade-off, they can't cancel this deal. How would OUTA and civil society respond to something like that? Because then if behind closed doors, it is already a done deal. We're pretty helpless, aren't we, at going forward?
If they argue it's a done deal, that would be very premature from government side. And it would be wrong from government to weigh the importance or the interests of a private Turkish company against the interests of the public. So the public should get the benefit of the doubt. Whichever reason or whichever the decision makes should always be in the interest of the electricity consumer and the public. So when government says that Karpowership, or NERSA actually said that Karpowership would suffer financial detriment if these generation licenses are set aside, that can simply not stand. That just shows that the public does not mean a lot to the energy regulator.
Okay, before I let you go, paint me a very quick worst case scenario and best case scenario. By God, do we need that best case scenario right now here in South Africa? So just paint those two pictures for us going forward regarding this application against NERSA.
Worst case scenario is obviously we get an order that is not in our favor, and then the rest of the processes continue and Karpowership is connected for the next 20 years. Best case scenario is the generation licenses are set aside, government reverts and revamps the risk mitigation program and start to get the other IPPs online as fast as possible without any further delay. That would require some additional regulatory reform. And what we also would like to see is a streamlining of Eskom's unbundling process into generation, transmission, and distribution. That would the breaking of Eskom's monopoly would certainly level the playing field and would open the doors to additional independent power producers, alleviating the blight we are seeing with load shedding currently.
Undoubtedly. Thank you indeed for that. And we must talk again, very especially about the supposed sabotage at Eskom. I look forward to that discussion. Good luck. And we are holding thumbs for a very good outcome. Brendan Slade from OUTA, thank you indeed for your insights this morning right here on Salam Media.
Thank you, Julie. All of the best.
10:05 exactly, and of course we are now heading towards our final interview for the morning, and do hope you're going to stick with us for a little while longer. And inshallah, we'll bring you that interview in a minute or two. And it is with AfriForum, and it has to do with the flying of the mast, or the flying of the old South African flag, the apartheid flag of all things. So let's hear what's their story as far as this is concerned. It is exactly 5 after 10 o'clock right here on Salam Media.